This episode of Heavy New York is brought to you by Metallica's new Blackened Whisky. That is so awesome, as well as Louder Than Hell. And we are here with Katherine, the author of Louder Than Hell. Thank you for your time.
The co-author, technically. I can't, pretend not to know John Wiederhorn, but that's the last we'll have to speak of him.
Okay. Yeah. Is he here?
Nope.
So, no.
His loss.
Yep. Oh, and also by Lucky 13
Yay.
Saloon. So before we do it, we got a toast.
Yes.
I am not doing a take 2 of this.
Okay.
So we got to make sure we
Damn
get
it.
this shot
I'd like
right.
to, but okay. Cheers. Ooh.
Whew. It's not that bad.
Yeah, actually, not at all.
I wonder how much different it would taste if it was like a Master of Puppets whiskey.
Wouldn't that be cool if they had one for each album and then the taste was tweaked to reflect the album?
Yeah, but I don't want
What would the Black Album taste like?
better than what the Lulu would taste like.
That would be fruity.
I don't know if it would be fruity as much as it would just be bad.
There you go.
But we have a nice table to go along with it. So if we do make a Lulu one, it's...
Yes.
All right, that was awful. But it's so awesome to have you here.
Thank
you. Thank you for meeting me out here today. So before we get into talking about the life of journalism, Louder Than Hell, a book on heavy metal history. I'd imagine there's a lot of history covered into it.
There was more that got cut. There was probably that much more.
Really?
Yes, but it's expensive. Paper is expensive, and literally that's the reason why they didn't print the extra chapters.
Yeah, understandably so. I mean, it's fair to say there's a long heavy metal history. Without giving too much away of the book for people who haven't read it yet, giving like a rundown. So are you like talking about from like maybe Led Zeppelin? But the looks of this book, it's like going from Led Zeppelin to like Asking Alexandria. Like how?
That's exactly it. Well, from L to A. Yeah, it starts, I think the first chapter is called Proto-Metal, and it's pre-Zeppelin. It's even, I think we might start in Detroit, MC5, Iggy Pop, kind of the Blue Cheer, just the bands that were really loud, distorted guitars. Some people consider that metal, some don't. And then, of course, we go into new wave of British heavy metal, tons on Judas Priest. We had Rob Halford write the afterword on this book. I think we had, Scott Ian does the foreword, Rob does the afterword. I think that's how it worked. So, tons on Priest and, of course, Iron Maiden. A little bit on, Saxon and bands that weren't quite as huge and influential, but, we couldn't fit everyone in, but we tried.
Yeah. Well, metal has grown so much. If you look, because, a lot of people think that even Beethoven was like the first real rock star. He had the intensity, the hair, he had everything that a metal musician would have.
Yes.
But, like, and how do you think metal has evolved so much? Because, we couldn't have foreseen a band like Cannibal Corpse existing when Led Zeppelin was happening.
I know.
Like, when Metallica was starting, we couldn't foresee a band like Revocation, So, like, I was just curious, as somebody who's been around for so long and who's worked in the world of heavy metal, how you think metal has evolved and why do you think it kind of took the direction it did?
Right. That's a huge question, and I probably won't have a brilliant answer, but I will try. What I wonder, I guess, starting in this day and age, like, what's next and how far can we go? Have we reached the end where, everything's been done and we're just going to redo it in slightly different ways? I guess in the early days of Zeppelin and Deep Purple, do you consider those bands metal, first of all?
Yeah, of course.
Do you?
Yeah.
You say of course. I don't know if I do. And Black Sabbath, even Ozzy said, we're not metal, what did he say? We're a loud blues band.
Well, I guess
like
metal at the time was kind of like a subcategory of just rock in general.
Yes.
So metal is like the only subgenre which went off and made its own subgenres.
Yes. That would be a good book, by the way, if you have an inkling, just all the subgenres.
Oh, no, I made a periodic table of heavy metal subgenres.
I love that. What's that? Crabcore. I like that. That's just,
Yeah.
So to answer your question, I don't know. I think there's always a hunger for harder, faster, louder, more evil in the case of metal. Sabbath, I don't think Sabbath were intentionally evil. They took their name from a horror movie. I think they wanted to be more horror spooky and, the early sounds of, rain falling and witches. It was a little more mystical than flat out horror or shock, which, bands like Slipknot have taken to the nth degree. But, they owe everything to Alice Cooper, as does Marilyn Manson and other guy with a female name.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think just the longing for something new, something more intense, and I don't think, I can't say if it's suburban, if it's in the cities, but I think there's a lot of kids in their bedrooms who are like, I can do this better, I'm going to make it harder, and Slipknot from Iowa, I guess, right?
Yeah.
It's everywhere, and I think just the quest is to do something new, bigger, heavier, louder, scarier.
Yeah.
But I don't know, how much scarier can we get? That's a good question.
Well, I mean, think about it. When Black Sabbath, I love Black Sabbath, but compared to the stuff that's come out since then, I don't consider
Yes.
them as heavy as, a lot of other bands
Right.
that are out there.
Oh, not
But
at
when they
all.
started,
Yes.
they played at my grandfather's club before they were huge, and they were the scariest thing
Wow.
anybody's ever heard in their life.
Right.
Yeah, Ozzy, you trashed my grandfather's club. I'm coming for you for that. But you get how, at that time, Black Sabbath was insanely heavy, but
Right.
now you have a band like Cannibal Corpse.
Right. But I mean, like, if Watain, are they, I think the props and the goat's blood and goat's heads and stuff, I mean, I don't know if that's a prop for not being as, I mean, how heavy can you be? I always wonder that. I mean, I'm a super fan of big, heavy, grungy, sludgy. That's my thing. Just this down-tuned and loud, and the brown sound, I believe
Yeah.
someone has called it. So I don't know. I mean, I would like to see a band go to the extremes musically without needing masks or, I mean, Alice Cooper, Kiss, all their props and stuff are awesome, but a band like Watain or I don't know who else uses actually like props. I mean, actually, when I saw Wasp,
Behemoth.
yes, Behemoth. Or if you're a Monomarth, you've got, your ships, which is
Yeah.
nice too. When I first saw Wasp, which would have been, I was probably in high school, it was in the 80s in LA, and they were throwing meat into the crowd,
That's it's a little
I don't-
excessive.
Yeah. Which was exciting for me as a teenager. I'm like, ooh, this is so weird, and But I think, my personal quest and love is for just as heavy as you can get. I mean, I enjoy like an Avatar or someone who have kind of a
Yeah.
circus theme metal. It's not something I listen to necessarily, but I like, I like to go see them. I mean, I guess there's a big difference in bands I don't mind going to see and bands that I listen to.
Yeah. Well, one band that really I think utilizes that is In This Moment.
Yes.
And I saw them open for Disturbed, Korn, and Seven Dust
Oh my
before
God.
they even started utilizing their stage presence
Right.
with their mask and
Right.
stuff. I think in the end, sometimes they do it to add to the live presence, but maybe it's also some bands like Tool likes to have a visual aspect
Yes.
to go along with their music as well.
Yeah, I appreciate when a band has the full sort of package, which I don't know if I see that like brilliant creativity. I can't think of someone. I mean, there's actually smaller bands that I've interviewed who have a whole through theme of their life and their music, and every little thing is well thought out, and I kind of love that. Someone who has a vision that is just all encompassing.
Yeah.
Alice Cooper on stage and off. I keep talking about him because, of course, I work with him, so I have
Yeah.
the inside scoop on him. I mean, actually, I guess it's nice to live your life on stage like off, but that could lead to death. I
yeah.
think depending what kind of a band you're in or how
Megadeth.
extreme you are. Yes. So.
Yeah. Well, it's funny that you mentioned that because that we talked about the imagery behind metal because
Right.
metal is I would say as much of a lifestyle as it is a subgenre of music. I mean,
Yes.
there's a fashion that goes along with it, imagery, a message, so much more.
Right.
But we couldn't have foreseen that when Black Sabbath started coming along.
Right.
So along with the different sounds that metal has made, I was also wondering, in this book, if you read
Yes.
it, maybe you get the answers.
Uh-huh.
But I'd also imagine that with the sound of metal evolving, the imagery and everything else was evolved in it as well, right?
Yeah, I think a fun thing was, I feel there's, metal has a bad name among some people and some bands. Def Leppard's in the book. Are they metal? They say no, and I think they kind of feel metal is silly. That's the impression I get. And some bands who are kind of, not quite metal, but get tossed in that have that impression, which is sad. And the people who really own it, as we know, were like Ronnie James Dio and, of course, Rob Halford, who gave himself the name the Metal God.
Yeah.
So, and you know, in talking with Rob, I think the story is in the book. It better be, if not, new printing. We talked about the iconic jacket. I mean, and he talked about, I believe it was here in New York, where we are now, how he went to like gay and leather kind of stores, probably like the Pleasure Chest or something, if that was around then, to kind of get his outfit. And he took it from the gay bar scene, which no one knew then, and that kind of became the iconic look, I think. I mean, Black Sabbath in the early days were more, and actually, you've probably seen photos of Rob. I don't think we have one in the book, but he was like in flowy caftans in the early days. So I think in the early days, of course, metal didn't have the look, but I think the denim and leather brought us all together, as Saxon would say. I mean, I think that's the basics and the battle vests.
The denim and leather brought us all together. I love that.
Right? Isn't that great? I mean, it's true. I mean, but it's kind of weird that, you know, denim and leather, non-metal people wear that too. You know, Bruce Springsteen wears that, and he's not exactly
Elton
metal.
John.
Yes. So I guess, you know, bullet belts. You know, I think Kerry King tells a story of how he got his studded armband, and he thought it was the coolest thing. Then they played with some band, I don't remember who it was, but the guy's nails that he'd done on his armband were so much bigger than Carrie's own one. So I thought that was really funny.
Yeah.
It's nice to see Carrie humbled.
Yeah. Well,
So-
going back to the level of heaviness, because heaviness is like subjective too. Like I've had people ask me, "Oh, is the music you listen to heavy like Creed?" Like they would think Creed
Do
is
you
like.
walk away then?
I'd be like, "Why don't you take a listen and find
yeah,
out?"
right.
Because and then you know I play them Goat Whore, and you know they're
Right.
like, it most
I
definitely.
like Goat Whore, yes.
Yes. Oh my God, they played on this very stage at a wedding.
What?
Yeah.
Wow. Were you here, obviously?
Yes, but I don't remember the majority of that set. Sadly, it was a wedding again.
Okay.
So,
You mean you were just so overcome with emotion of the love in the room. That's what you mean, right?
add a little bit more of like
It was a blackened wedding.
to say the least. But
I love that.
Yeah, but like in terms of heaviness, it's also like because metal has always been a product of its environment as well. Ozzy was saying like, I want to sing about the devil. I want to sing
Right.
about this. But then you know you have a band like Rage Against the Machine who
Right.
was very politically driven. You have a band like Slayer that tackles just about every dark subject matter you can imagine. So
Yes.
I was always curious to how the subject matter that metal portrays, like it's amazing on how like they utilize pain as a paintbrush almost. I guess that's the best way to say
That's
it.
a beautiful analogy.
Yeah.
I'd like to see that in a tattoo. Paint is a paintbrush and a paintbrush.
I'm
there.
running out of room, so
Never. Your neck's clean. I see. You can get a, you know. Yeah, I was actually just thinking like Guns N' Roses, you know, Welcome to the Jungle, Appetite for Destruction. That pretty much covers, you know, Axl moving to LA from Indiana and then, you know, descending into the darkness that he found there. Of course, LA is very sunny and light on the outside, but there's a lot of, you know, fun to be had there, which they did. So I think, you know, actually it's interesting, to completely jump with no segue, we were talking about New Year's Day, and I'm sorry, that's my phone that keeps dinging.
it's all good.
I'm super popular. They have a new record coming out, and it's pretty much the singer's, you know, life story, emotions.
Yeah.
Female singer, but she's got some, you know, lots of swear words, lots of, you know, fuck you kind of stuff in there.
What I've seen in my 2 interviews with her.
Yes, exactly. So she's not afraid of that. I mean, that's not most of metal, I would say, minding your personal relationships, unless you do it in that sort of way, you know, Axl Rose, Back Off Bitch, or, you know, whatever else is out there. Ugly Kid Joe.
Yeah.
Let me turn off my phone so we can stop dinging. It's nice being so popular.
But it
though.
makes the interview more natural.
It does,
with a
doesn't
phone
it?
going off in the
We're
back.
real.
Yep, I ain't cropping that out. So, and you know, you mentioned Guns N'
I
Roses.
wish I was a rock star. I could be like, look who's... Yeah, but it wasn't.
You mentioned Guns N' Roses because the first time I actually ever saw what you do was when you were in the Behind the Music documentary
God.
for Guns
That's
N' Roses.
funny.
If someone doesn't stop dancing with Mr. Brownstone, the band is going to end.
I mean, I was shocked at that show. That was at the Coliseum in LA when
They
the
opened
Stones
for
were
Rolling
opening for the
Stones.
my God, Guns were just on fire. And I think it was either the night before or 2 nights previously, Guns had played the Rip magazine party. I mean, and that was kind of my professional entree into the whole metal thing. Is I started at Rip magazine in the late '80s. I mean, which is when the magazine started. I guess I was hired by Lon Friend like 2 or 3 years after they started.
Wow.
And that was when Guns were already happening that time, if it was '88 or something. And I forgot your original question, except it was about Dancing with Mr. Brownstone and me being on behind the music.
I was curious to what the hell that even meant, Mr. Brownstone.
Well, Mr. Brown, I mean, I am not a heroin person, but I mean, I gather there is brown heroin, so I'm guessing, Mr. Brownstone obviously was a heroin reference. Ultimately, everyone figured that out. And I guess dancing with means, what's the word that they use for when you like dabble in drugs? There's a word for it. I can't.
I gotta watch that documentary again.
What is it? Well, anyway, for chipping, is that it? Maybe that's it. I'm not hip to the drug lingo.
I'm sure there's plenty of people who watch this.
But Dancing with Mr. Brownstone, meant fooling around with heroin.
Yeah.
I don't know if Axl was doing hard drugs or with any regularity at that point.
Compared to the other four guys in the band, Axl was a choir boy.
Yes,
so.
I know. That's so interesting. I mean, I posted something on Facebook today of a photo of me and Duff McKagan before he joined Guns. So that's how I got to know Guns, is that I met Duff before he was even in the band. And so when he got into Guns N' Roses, I was like, there.
Wow.
He came to our friend's house. He's like, I've got this Appetite for Destruction. It's our new album. Does anyone want to hear it? And we're all like, sure.
Wow.
Yeah.
Little did you know that was history in the making.
I'm like,
right there.
That sounds cool. Oh, yeah. And I'd been going to all their shows at that point.
Yeah. And now they're finally reuniting, which some people thought would never happen.
Including the band, right?
Yeah.
Not in this lifetime, as they said.
Yeah, but it happened.
Yeah. I mean, I have to wonder, what I like in a band and what I liked about Guns in the early days is they were a gang. They were like-minded guys all united in a mission together. And now what are they? Are they guys who play, go off stage, don't speak? There's not much interaction on stage like the old days of everyone leaning against everyone. And
yeah,
well,
I've noticed with Guns N' Roses, along with the thrash movement, I talked with Bob Nalbandian about this, that Guns N' Roses and thrash were the two movements that really rebelled against the 80s hair metal, which a lot of people thought Motley Crue and Poison and Cinderella, they're singing about partying and having a good time. There were people who were like, metal is not supposed to sound so happy.
Yeah, I don't know if did I think that idea. I also saw Poison before they were signed, and I thought they were goofy but fun. They had catchy songs. The shows were always a party. I guess I didn't take them super seriously, I suppose, is what. And, I had a lot of guy friends who were, how old was I at the time? Maybe late teens even, but I had older guy friends who would go to see Poison just because there'd be young girls there, So, they didn't stand a chance to be taken, as seriously as Guns N' Roses, I think.
Yeah.
But of course, they've done really well in their own niche, and good for them. Yeah. They're included in there.
Yeah, as they should be.
Yes,
they're definitely an inspiration.
There is a hair metal chapter.
When you go from the most known extreme metal band, which is Pantera, and you see their inspirations and even how they started with Terry Glaze in the band, they were like a 90s Motley Crue.
The photo of Phil Anselmo with hair is just awesome. It's funny, for the book, I found Terry Glaze on Facebook, reached out to him, and got an interview.
Really?
Yeah, that was just how that happened.
I would be terrified to do that.
It was terrified of Terry himself or reaching out on Facebook for that?
Both.
Well, don't you think Phil is a scarier actual person than Terry?
Yeah.
Okay.
But it's fucking Pantera.
Yeah, I actually, I will tell you, I have one small regret in metal. I probably have a ton, but I can't remember them. There's like you at the wedding,
Regrets is a big subject matter.
But I was at Rip Magazine, and I was an editor, and when Cowboys from Hell came out, and I heard it, I'm like, oh, this is pretty cool. And then this is in the old days of the record business, which you didn't get to see, when they're like, we'll fly you to see the band. Well, there was so much great stuff. And I thought, I like it, but I don't know. So I sent a writer out to Texas, and then he came back. He's like, you will not even believe what happened. The strip clubs, the this, the that, the guys, the brothers. I'm like, God damn it, why didn't I go? And then, Pantera, I would say, are one of my favorite bands to this day.
Yeah.
So,
And Matt, a lot of people say that Pantera saved metal because we just talked about Guns N' Roses, Poison, thrash, the 80s.
Right.
But now we move on to the 90s when metal has been declared, which I think is the biggest bullshit ever, but metal has been declared dead.
right, killed by grunge.
Which, to me, because I thought that grunge, it was also a very melancholy sounding, very dark. They address a lot of, you look at Jeremy by Pearl Jam. That's a
Yes.
very dark
Oh,
song.
Yes.
Or, fucking Kurt Cobain. I mean, that Bleach record
I
is
know.
heavy as all hell. So, but a lot of people say Pantera was the 90s metal band that pretty much kept metal alive in the 90s.
Oh, yeah, I think I would have to agree. I mean, living in LA at the time, Geffen Records was there on the corner of Doheny and Sunset, and I had gone there many times to interview all the bands that I loved, which were like, don't judge me, Salty Dog, Little Caesar, Rock City Angels, and then Guns N' Roses, of course. And then I got an advance cassette from a publicist. She's like, I think this is something special. I think it's going to be big. And it was Nirvana's Nevermind, also from the halls of Geffen.
Yeah.
And I went to see Nirvana at the Roxy, one of their, not one of their first shows. They'd been around, like you say, Bleach, and I don't know what else they did on Sub Pop before that. But I don't know. I guess I'm not so strident or hardcore that I'm like, you have to like this and you can't like that. I mean,
Thank you.
I loved it all. Again, this was still the awesome era of record companies throwing money around. So I was flown to Seattle to see stuff. My Sister's Machine. When I was at RIP, they flew one of our writers to interview Alice in Chains and Pearl Jam, and Jeff Ament picked her up from the airport. It was just like such an awesome thing. And at that point, no one was really, I guess we weren't looking at it from above. So we all thought, oh, it's just a new extension of rock. But now in, hindsight, everyone's like, okay, it had to die. We're having guests today, in case you didn't know. This is my friend.
Oh, I did not know.
I told her I would be here doing something very professional, so she's joining us.
As you can see, very professional.
Yes. All right, we are recording right now, so you may sit and rock out with us.
Okay.
She's my not so metal friend, but she and I went to well, I shouldn't say the word the Eagles. We really went to see Fleetwood Mac and Earth, Wind and Fire.
I love both. I
Yeah?
love all three
See?
of those bands. So
Okay, there you
I saw
go.
the Earth, Wind and Fire musical when I was 11. Hot Feet.
I didn't know there was one.
Hot Feet. I don't know if it was strictly Earth, Wind and Fire, but
Okay.
like I remember
soul, funk, 70s
yeah,
R&B.
and it was like
didn't
the
see
dancing
that.
was so amazing. I remember being 11 years old and just crying on how beautiful the choreography was.
And look at you now.
Wearing an Obscura hoodie and a behemoth shirt underneath.
I won't ask what kind of, underwear you have. It's probably Poison. I think they made. Never mind. Let's
I hate
move on.
right. There's
Yes.
some things that don't need to be said.
Yes.
But because we were talking about like how Pantera in the 90s, but the 90s
Right.
I thought was a revolutionary time for metal with bands like Sepultura, Fear Factory.
Yes. It's funny. Sepultura I loved. I only saw them a couple times.
Did you see them
but-
with Max?
Yes. And, it's funny. I was actually writing for the LA Times at that point, which was really exciting for me as a journalist. And I was writing about metal. I think LA Times didn't take metal that seriously, but I think they thought, I can't speak for them, but I think they thought, oh, we'll have a girl cover metal. That way we'll cover all our bases. They can't say we don't hire women and we're not covering metal. So I reviewed Sepultura, and I hope I wrote this. If not, I hope I wrote it. That I felt Sepultura could be the new Metallica.
Really? A lot of
Yeah.
people called them the new Slayer. But
Oh, did
not-
they? Yeah. I mean, of course, sadly, it didn't happen.
Yeah, Max left
You know?
Sepultura when I was 4. So,
Oh, you kids. Ugh.
yep. And Roots to this day is one of my
Yes.
favorite albums of all time. So,
Yes.
but like you also had we have to look in the 90s on like what was, you had 9 Inch Nails. So
Yes.
industrial became huge.
Yes. Yeah, that's funny. When, again, I was at RIP Magazine during this time, and someone suggested we get an industrial columnist. So, and it wasn't necessarily like my favorite genre, and I didn't think it would be long lasting. I don't know. But I loved Ministry, KMFDM, and then there were a lot of, oh God, what was it called? Engines of Aggression. There were a lot of local LA bands that were kind of doing that. I mean, I guess to this day, who's surviving Ministry and Nine Inch Nails? I mean, I'm sure there's a lot of others, but in the public eye, those are the main ones. So that was, I appreciated it. I don't know if I liked the sterility. I like the loudness and energy and just the relentlessness or unrelent. I love that about it.
What about Fear Factory?
I like them. You know, it's funny. I'm friends with Dino. I love Burton. They were, you know, as LA people, I saw them a lot. Liked them, was never favorites. Just, I think they're great guys. I think it's a great band, but it's just someone I didn't follow super closely. I mean, demanufacture, remanufacture. I was around for all of it, and I know it. But yeah, I mean, actually, we haven't spoken of the word NU for new metal yet.
Oh, we're getting there because
no.
we're going through a timeline because
Okay.
the 90s was so revolutionary because we'll hold it off for now.
Okay.
I'll delay the inevitable.
Okay.
But you also had Morbid Angel,
Yes.
Obituary,
Yes.
Cannibal Corpse, Death, Deicide. You had, in Norway, Mayhem.
Yes.
Mayhem, Gorgoroth, Burzum, the black metal movement was thriving. So, like, I don't understand why people thought metal was dead in the 90s.
Well, I mean, when people say, you know, grunge killed metal, on a technical, realistic level, apparently MTV stopped Headbangers Ball, stopped covering metal. So I think that stuff all fell from the mainstream eye. The bands you mentioned, you know, Gorgoroth, Cannibal Corpse, they were never on MTV like those bands. So I think, yeah, they were underground. To the people who knew, it was thriving. But to the, you know, the world at large, they'd never heard of them. And for me personally, like I said, I love the most heavy, the most extreme, but that's stuff I didn't listen to on a regular basis.
Yeah. I guess it was dead in terms of, like, the glam metal era or something like that.
Yeah. I mean, I was so fascinated with all the stories and actually in the book, I will say John Wiederhorn, we mentioned him again. We did divide the book up a little bit in terms of who covered what, just like, you know, he had more interviews with all those guys. I mean, I've interviewed Chris Barnes, a lot of, you know, more the Florida, Morrisound, death metal stuff. I didn't do much. I just didn't cover much European metal. So John wrote that part of the book. Again, it's something I was more interested in, like from a societal impact. You know, are these people eating brains? Are they burning churches? I mean, not necessarily just for the you know, weirdness and stuff, but just like, how do people get this way? Is it real? Are they, you know, are people drawn to this music because they're that way? Does the music make them that way? So I was more like a armchair psychologist for those bands. And again, that's something where I would love to go to a show, but if I'm home, unless I'm getting ready to go out or something and like need some music to get me going, I wouldn't listen to that. I usually use Motorhead for that now. If I'm like, I'm going to a show, I'm going to turn on Motorhead and you know, blow dry my hair.
I guess to each his own.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. And I also don't think it's a male-female thing, because I saw Slayer last year at the outdoor water place. What's it called? Joe's Beach. That's it. And I was in the pit the whole time.
Moshing?
Well, I was in front, actually, of the mosh. So there's, you know, like 4 or 5 people, then mosh, and then people.
Yep.
I was in the front. So I was, you know, boom, 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 bruises, feet, you know, bruises on the feet. That's always so interesting.
Yeah.
You come home and you take off your shoes, you've got these little bruises from people stomping on you.
Somebody must have bit your ankle or something like that. Stranger things have happened in the mosh pit.
Yeah, no, not that. Just people, you know, landing hard on you. So yeah, I love that feeling. I love that release. I'm not scared in those situations. I'm happy. You know, I'm probably the oldest person. Well, maybe not, but I'm up there compared to, you know, I look around, there's kids who are 14. You know, they could like be my kids, and I applaud that. I think that's pretty cool.
Yeah, you're never too young or old for metal.
I hope not.
But then comes the moment you've been dreading, because we just covered the 90s. Now comes a little album, which is now I think sold more than U2's Joshua Tree. Hybrid Theory.
Oh.
by Linkin Park came out in
Yes.
2000, which is my first metal album.
Wow. Okay.
I was 6.
Okay. I was not. I was I was actually working in a radio show then called Rockline in LA, and I remember it was a live radio show. We had 2 bands on a week. We had a classic rock and an active rock. They fit into the active rock category. Sorry, but I barely consider them metal.
A lot of people don't, and it's
Yeah.
understandable.
I don't know. But I mean, maybe good for them. They can be metal and more, like the Deftones, for instance. I guess.
Well, people like to crap on new metal, but
Uh-huh.
I just want to say this. Think about how many arena headliners we have from that movement. Korn, Linkin Park, Disturbed, Deftones, System of a Down.
Right.
Slipknot, they're not new metal, but they
Right,
kind of
they were-
started in
yeah.
that scene. So
And a lot. I mean, Cold Chamber became Devil Driver, sort of, and a lot of those bands are still around in various incarnations. Definitely, I agree. Actually, when I first saw Korn, I wasn't sure about them. And then the first time I interviewed them, they reminded me that I'd written that. Like, we thought you wrote something where you didn't like us. And like, oh God, this is uncomfortable. But it wasn't instant love with me for Korn. And Linkin Park, I also really appreciate them as people. I've only met, I don't know, Mike and Chester a couple times, I guess. But I mean, I think they were good, thoughtful, interesting people. And what I was going to say about the radio show is, for years we had 2 bands on a week. Everyone, I mean, everyone you can think of. When we had Linkin Park on, I started getting all these emails and requests from people to come see the show in person. We had a tiny little audience thing, and that had really never happened before. I mean, we had Slash on, we had Styx, and we did all the classic rock people. We had Eddie Money, we had whoever, and no one really wanted to come down, but people sought out, all right, where is this radio show happening? I want to be there. And actually, I hired an intern from that. A girl who was a fan came down. She's like, I want to do what you do. And so, yeah, Linkin Park really, I think, did get a lot of people, including first grade you.
kindergarten.
Oh!
Well,
Yes.
what I've noticed about a band like Linkin Park or Limp Bizkit or any of those bands,
Right.
like, they were a band, for at least my generation, they were kind of like the path choosing moments. Are you going to go more rock and metal, or are you going to go into hip hop and stuff?
Really?
Because
Okay.
when I was in high school, there was a stigma between hip hop fans and rock and metal fans. Like, we hated it.
I'm sure.
We were like greasers and socias. So, like, but in the end, our mutual love was for Linkin Park.
I like that.
Like, that really bridged a gap between
Oh.
it, because Linkin Park covered
Both.
the hip hop fans loved
Yeah,
Mike
the-
Shinoda,
yeah, the
we loved
DJ,
Chester.
yeah.
So
Wow. You know what? No one's ever told me that, and I think that's great because I was obviously older than that. In my high school, was there? I mean, I guess we had kind of punk and I don't know. I was kind of classic rock in high school. I didn't feel any of that. There weren't bands that divided my school, or if there were, I was too nerdy to know it.
yeah, I never understood, actually, because when I would talk to people who were like around during the time, like with metal going nuts with Judas Priest and Iron
Right.
Maiden, I never understood what the stigma was between metal fans and punk and hardcore fans. To me,
Right.
whether it's Agnostic Front or Judas Priest, they're both very aggressive forms of music.
I
So
know.
why did hardcore fans not like metal fans and vice
Yeah.
versa?
I mean, I don't know much about this history, but obviously with the Who and stuff, the mods and the rockers, I guess it's always been sort of that divide. I don't know how much of it is made up by the press, but I guess not, because you talk about it definitely being a thing in school.
Well, just from
you know?
hanging out with, the hardcore crowd and everything
Mm-hmm.
like that, granted, wearing a Bullet for My Valentine shirt at an Agnostic Front show
Mm-hmm.
is not my smartest decision, but
So you'd go to a concert and then wear it to school the next day? Is that what you did?
when I was in,
Yeah, when
well,
you were
I
in
didn't
high
go to
school?
many concerts when I was in high school because I
What?
didn't live too far. Like, Lacuna Coil being my favorite band of all time, I would always go into the city when Lacuna Coil was playing.
Right.
Disturbed being my other favorite band. Yes. That's
You're
what
down with the sickness.
Yep. Oh, wow, motherfucker.
Don't you love that? I do that all the time too.
Yeah, if I didn't have a sinus infection, I'd actually do it very well. But like
That was pretty good. Have
yeah.
you interviewed David Draymond?
on the phone, not in
Okay.
person yet. I'm hoping for that.
Were you shaking, freaked out. Speaking of journalism, let's tell the people what it's like when we prep for interviews.
Oh, well, because it was a phone interview, and if you've watched the phone interviews before, you know what I'm talking about. They're always the hardest in terms of getting the right sound.
Wait, so you video your phone interviews?
No,
Okay.
I use this very audio device.
Okay.
And I put my phone on speaker.
Okay.
And put it like at a certain distance from it.
All right.
When I interviewed David from Disturbed, we
Mm-hmm.
had that snowstorm that happened in like November or something like that.
Okay.
So there were sirens going on outside my house left and right. So I actually recorded it in the bathroom of my apartment where it was quiet.
Nice. My bathroom isn't that quiet.
Yeah,
Good for you.
and recorded the whole thing while there was mayhem going on outside.
That's great.
But phone interviews are always the hardest because there's also, you can't tell when the guy's done talking.
Yes.
And you don't want to interrupt him.
Or if he's kidding and he's raising an eyebrow, or sometimes it's hard to get the nuances.
But you take what you can get. So I interviewed my two favorite bands, but they were both on the phone.
So far.
Yeah, so
I don't
far.
think you're done.
I'm not anytime soon, I hope.
Good.
But going back
Yes.
to the timeline.
Yes.
Going back to the timeline.
Glad you have all this in your head. There's not a single note here. He's just doing it all.
This is a podcast, so it's all improvised. But there was also another movement, and being that you were around during all this times, I don't know how big of a fan you are, but during the time of nu metal, there was also another movement which I love, but has been mocked by many, and that's the metalcore movement.
Mm-hmm. I wouldn't say I mocked it. I wouldn't say I was into it. I guess
Killswitch Engage.
I'm a neutral party. I mean, I saw Killswitch last time, I guess 2 years ago. Again, what year did they first come out? I'm trying to think.
Killswitch
Where
Engage's
was I at
biggest
that
break
point?
when Roadrunner was pumping money into that band.
Roadrunner.
Yeah.
The money that they got from who's their big band who made the money for all the other bands?
Well, Slipknot was probably the
No,
big...
they had not Matchbox 20, but
Nickelback?
yes, Nickelback funded all the metal bands, basically. It's from what I understand. They made so much money for Roadrunner that they could sign the metal bands that they truly loved.
Good on Nickelback.
I know, right?
Good on Nickelback.
I don't know if they know that, but...
But Killswitch Engage, their big thing came out in 2002.
Right.
So them along
Where was
with...
I then? Yeah, I'm trying to think where I was in my career at that. I mean, I've always been a music journalist, but I've also always had day jobs. I think in 2002, I actually worked at the Sharon Osbourne show. She had a TV show.
Yes, I remember you.
Yes, and so was that?
I read
2000?
that about you.
That might have been around then, and so I was busy booking Dido and Black Eyed Peas. So at that point, I wasn't
So metal.
super. Yes, at that point, I wasn't as ensconced in the metal world, and so yeah, I mean, I might have interviewed Killswitch. I have to say, I'm sorry to disappoint you with your big passion here, but yeah, not much. I can't remember. I know Killswitch are in here. Who are some of your other favorites of the metalcore era?
All That Remains is my favorite.
Think they're in here too. John must have done those interviews. I might have a Killswitch interview. I mean, do you remember everyone you've ever interviewed?
I mean, I've done almost 300, but close.
I'm trying to think how many how many would I have done? I don't know. Probably 900 at least.
I'm
I don't
catching
know.
up.
But you're very prolific. You do so many interviews a week.
I try.
Yeah. I do less, but I've been doing it 1,000 times longer than you. So,
Yeah.
But yeah, so I don't even remember who I might have interviewed in that era. But yeah, it was sadly, it's not a thing I can speak to very eloquently.
Well, fast forward, and this was kind of
Yes.
like one of the things that I really wanted to get into, because just recently you were hosting an event with New Year's Day.
Yes.
And, even nowadays, there's a lot of new bands that have come out that kind of utilize an older sound, like Power Trip with their old school thrash sound.
Yes.
Greta Van Fleet having their
Yes.
Led Zeppelin sound,
Right.
or I guess, for lack of better words. So,
No.
how do you
That's the word.
how do you think the world of metal is kind of doing today?
Well, I would say at the moment I'm hosting a radio show for this internet station called Gimme Radio.
Yep.
And I was excited to take it on when they asked me to be a DJ. There's tons. It's not like I'm special. There's dozens and dozens of DJs, mostly journalists, except for Dave Mustaine and Randy Bly. So through it, I've got to listen to a lot of newer bands that I normally wouldn't, because my day job is Alice Cooper and it's all classic rock.
Yeah.
So I'm not, I don't have a regular outlet to write about metal at all. So the Gimme Radio show has forced me, for lack of a better word, to listen to new music. So I am getting way more up on it. I prefer stuff. I'm more of a doomy, gloomy.
Yob?
Yes, Yob. A band who played on this stage, Gozu. I love Gozu.
Oh my God, they're so good.
Love them. They're playing again soon at Vitus. I love Windhand. They're more, I think more ethereal.
Typo Negative?
Yes, of course. I didn't live in New York when Typo Negative were, coming up. I never went to L'Amour, the big
I never saw
venue.
them. So
No,
I was 16 when Peter died, so.
I went on the road with them, which was really exciting, which is another thing that doesn't happen that often when they send a journalist out with a band. So I was on Typo Negative's tour bus with them for several gigs. We were in Atlanta at the Masquerade, which is a cool thing. I told someone about them recently, and they're like, "Is that the tour with Danzig?" I'm like, "I don't even remember. I was focused on Typo Negative, who I really loved, and Josh. The whole band were just."
Yeah, Josh is an EMT now.
I know. I just spoke about him recently, and someone said he doesn't even really want to talk about music in the past.
Yeah, I unfortunately was in an ambulance last year. I'm fine now, but I was saying, oh my God, please let it be Josh who's driving that.
I wonder where he works. Is he in Brooklyn?
Well, I mean, I was in Manhattan because that's where I live.
We can just walk around. I'll just keep pushing you down and calling the ambulance until we get him.
Yeah, I like ask like, it's Josh from Typo Negative. Like I was in delirium. Like, is Josh from Typo Negative driving? They're like, who? I'm like, I guess he doesn't work for your ambulance line.
Do you remember when there was the time David Lee Roth was an EMT?
Yep. He was a paramedic. I think
paramedic.
he saved some.
What is the difference between? Are they the same thing?
EMT, paramedic is like the next level.
Oh, okay.
I'm not
Do
sure.
EMTs drive around paramedics?
I don't know. One of my best friends is an EMT who just got promoted to a paramedic.
Oh, okay.
So,
I didn't know that.
But they are different fields. But
Okay.
I guess you have to be an EMT to be. I don't know.
And you know who
Any
else?
medical people watching this,
Yes,
please
help us out.
Yeah.
You know who else was one who's the most non-metal person? Wait, I'm going to get this wrong. I want to say Ricky Nelson. Do you know who he is? Do you remember that 80s band Nelson with the twin brothers with the long hair? Their dad. Yeah, I think he was. That's weird that rock people would go into that. It's like the helping profession.
Well, think about it. We sing about music with blood and gore all the time. We could probably.
Do you think that's why they do it? It's like, I'd like to see real blood.
I don't think they would
Not
like
to
to, but I'm pretty sure that it won't phase them as bad.
Yeah, I guess. Oh, that's so interesting. So yeah, Typo Negative were definite favorites. I was working at Rip Magazine at the time, and we'd listen to Black Number One and Christian Woman and all that stuff. It was,
Another
was really,
band that proves that metal wasn't dead in
the
90s.
And at that point, also, again, though I didn't live here, part of that whole Brooklyn scene was also Life of Agony.
Yep. And, Sal played with both bands.
Yes.
So.
And I just went to see, and I don't think
Pale
I saw
Horse
you
Name.
there. Yeah.
I flew out to LA that day for them, so I was so pissed.
That was really nice. It's so interesting also when, a drummer is a front man. And
I called him the New York Dave Grohl. He was so flattered by that.
It's better than, not Peter Gabriel. Who's the drummer, who's the Genesis guy who is the drummer and then the singer? Phil Collins.
Oh, yes.
It's better than calling him Phil Collins.
Yes. But, going into like the world of metal today, because with bands like that, like I say A Pale Horse Named Death is kind of reinforcing the doom and gloom that Typo Negative had.
Yes.
And
which I love.
A band like Greta Van Fleet is reinforcing the classic rock sound. Power Trip enforcing the classic thrash sound.
Yes, I love all that. Yes,
so
that's definitely.
A lot of people like to think, especially with a band like Slayer going away, Ozzy going on his farewell tour, Kiss on their now 10th farewell tour.
Yes.
Do you think the world of metal is kind of like still thriving, or do you think there's stuff that...
I recently interviewed Dave Ellefson and Frank Bello for their new
Altitudes and Attitudes.
project. I was going to say bass extravaganza. And I said, the big four, now there's only three. Is there any other band who could come in to take that place? And they basically said the big four is the big four. Done.
Yeah.
But they didn't really have an idea of is there another big four, big three waiting in the wings? Are there bands that iconic who are going to be, referred to over the years as that? And I'm not sure there is. I mean, I don't know. I mean, what are your thoughts? I mean, who is going to be as influential as Metallica, Megadeth, Anthrax?
Well, there'll never be another Metallica, Megadeth, Anthrax.
Right,
That's
so-
what makes them
Yes,
Metallica,
exactly,
Megadeth,
exactly.
Anthrax. But like,
But who are that important, exciting, long-lasting? Who are out there now?
we'll take it
It's
from
not going to be Greta Van Fleet, in my opinion. But first, they're not metal. Second, I don't know enough about them, but I feel they were a little bit manufactured by, I think, Jason Flom, who might have been their A&R guy.
to each his own. I mean, people do
But-
identify with their music, so
Yeah.
I'm looking forward to see what.
Yeah, I'd like
I
to-
hope they don't suffer from the debut curse, as I call it,
Yeah.
where like they put out their album, let's see where it goes from there.
Right.
I'm happy that they're out there doing their thing.
Yeah.
But I mean, take it from a millennial perspective now. Sorry to you, old school. When I was in high school, the two biggest bands, or biggest, but like Avenged Sevenfold and Slipknot. And Avenged
Yes.
Sevenfold, I saw them play with Metallica on their Worldwide tour.
Right.
And the audience was, sure, it wasn't as packed. There were people showing up late for
Right, of
Metallica,
course.
but the audience was nuts. Must have counted a good 50 crowd surfers. They only played 9
Nice.
songs. You know, people were going nuts, singing along to every song.
Right.
Old school and new school metal heads. Volbeat opened up too.
I saw I saw that at the Garden. I think that
Yeah.
show. Right.
Yeah, so like, you know, they've been killing it. Gojira, who just
Love Gojira.
very
yes.
different from Metallica, but Metallica brought him out, and apparently that tour they did very well.
Right.
So I like to think that metal is just as good now as it was back then. There's just different faces representing it.
I would agree completely. I mean, every time someone says metal's dead, I mean, I've been around long enough to, have that every 10 years. And then someone assigns me an article where I have to go to Brian Slagle. Is metal dead? All the Monty Connor's metal dead? It's like, we all know it's not. But again, I think that the outlets are both more and less. Everything, when YouTube and Vivo and all the platforms came in, everything got diffused a little more. It wasn't like you had to wait at home and watch Headbangers Ball to see what was up. Now everyone can discover everything anyway.
Which I think is
So
amazing.
it is amazing, but it's also a little less cohesive. Everyone's not like, did you see that band last night? It's not like everyone's focusing on one thing that's curating our tastes, which is better, I agree.
Yeah.
But it also is like a little more
Well,
spread out and diffuse.
iTunes has always been good because if there's like one band whose album I really like, when I was downloading Lacuna Coil albums left and right,
Right.
they were like, oh, if you like that band, check out Epica with
Yes.
The Temptation.
Yes.
Like,
I use that feature all the time.
so like, I think it's
Yeah.
great. And then, hanging out in the New York City metal scene, I didn't know much about hardcore until I got involved in it. And, when I was telling people, I liked these bands and, got a couple laughs, they were like, here, let me show you what inspired these bands. And I got Agnostic Front and Sick of It All.
So, did you know Biohazard and all the...
I've heard the names.
Right.
I know Biohazard mainly because Christian, who used to play with Fear Factory,
Yes.
is in a band with Billy now. So like, it's really unique on how I thought that the old world of metal is really collaborating well with the new world of metal.
Yeah, I would agree very much. I think Brian Slagle and Metal Blade. I don't know if Megaforce Records are still around.
I
or
just
if
saw
they're in
Johnny and Marcia Suzuki
they
at
were
the Hall
right.
of Heavy Metal History.
So I think the good thing about that is they're signing new bands. It's not Brian Slagle isn't signing the new Betsy Bitch or the new Lizzie Borden. He still puts out some of those records, but I think Goat Horror are in Metal Blade.
Goat
right?
Horror,
Yes,
Allegiant.
exactly. Yes, exactly. So the people who kind of started putting out these records, they're still out there and their tastes have evolved. So they're faithful to the old school and still looking for what's new. Mike Getter, who is the A&R person for New Year's Day, I think.
Yeah.
I met him. He was a writer at Rip Magazine, and then he got into A&R and has been everywhere. So I think the people who loved it, look at me. I've been doing this a few years. I've been writing since I was like 19, 18. How old were you when you started?
I started Heavy New York. We just hit 2 years ago.
Okay.
Like February 17th is when the first podcast was
Okay.
done, which is
Yay.
soon.
Are we having an anniversary party somewhere? Is this it?
It's going to be me sitting at the corner of Lucky 13 being like, where did the last 2 years of my life go?
I know, right? No, I mean, I guess it's people like you. So you better not, in 20 years, you better be sitting here with someone else having these conversations.
Hopefully.
You have to carry the torch.
Oh my God, I hope. Oh my God, don't be like me, kids.
Well,
Well,
look what a great, you have yachts and houses. It's been great, right?
what the hell are you talking about? I got to go back to work after this.
Me too.
But, and like another thing I really wanted to ask you is from a metal journalist to a metal journalist, because, I just interviewed Bob Nalbandian,
Yes.
whose films, his work is predominantly films. But, I asked him, as a film director who makes documentaries about metal, is there like an art to film directing any documentary? Like, is it like, there's no difference between the art of a metal documentary and something on Animal Planet? As a journalist, whether you're
They're all
working...
animals.
That is true. But like, as somebody who...
You might
like,
need more whiskey. You're not sounding so good.
yeah, we're going to do one at the end of this.
Okay.
But like, as a journalist, is there an art to journalism that you... Because I never went to school for journalism and anything. I just found myself doing it. Is there an art to journalism, or for us metalheads who are fairly eccentric, there's its own little art behind it?
Wow, that is a huge question. Well, I mean, I can't only tell you my experience, but I will in brief. I went to journalism school because it was the only thing I liked and thought I could do well. The only A's I got were in writing and English and journalism. And I thought, I like telling stories. I like interviewing people. So when I went to journalism school at USC, I didn't go to be a music journalist. But I was living in LA. It was the 80s, and I was going to see clubs. I would go to clubs all the time to see bands. And so I started writing for our paper, which is called the Daily Trojan at USC. I wrote about Twisted Sister. And USC is a very preppy, if that word still exists, I don't know, Greek system, frat, sorority. And like no one at the school knew or care about Twisted Sister. But, I loved it. And I was like trying to spread the word, the gospel of metal. And then I still wasn't set on being a metal journalist. I thought I'll write about whatever. But then I got an internship at the LA Times. And I went for the Metropolitan section, which is like in New York here. It's just like, local people and stories about the city. But they saw that I'd written about bands. They're like, why don't you go to the calendar section? I'm like, well, all right. And so I went to the calendar section. And I feel that really kind of cemented my path towards music journalism. And it wasn't only metal necessarily. Some of my first interviews were Jim Carroll, who's like he's passed away, but he was a poet and an author. He wrote the Basketball Diaries. Great New York musician. And then my first job after college was Teen Magazine, and magazine for young women. So I was covering Johnny Depp in 21 Jump Street, speaking of old. And so yeah, I wasn't necessarily a metal journalist, but then again, living in LA, a lot of the shows I went to and the bands I loved, again, Guns N' Roses, I'm the same age-ish as those guys, so I came up in that whole scene and I loved it. And I was going to Scream and Cat House, and I saw Megadeth, I saw Faster Pussycat, I saw all that scene.
Did
and
you
I
see
really
Metallica with
loved that.
Mustaine?
No, I didn't.
Okay.
I know. I don't know how that happened. Also, I never saw Motley Crue in the early days either.
Oh, really?
There was a club called the Starwood, which was really infamous, and I was a teeny bit young, which is nice to say that I was too young for something finally. So, I don't know. People write about metal for, for The Atlantic, and they write about it for fanzines, and they write about it for Loudwire or whoever. As a metal journalist, as a journalist, it's important that you have professionalism and accuracy, and you're not just a fan. Obviously you're a fan because that's why you're doing it.
I feel like this is the field. This is when you're working in the world of metal, whether you're working as an A&R or at a record label or a journalist or hell, even a road crew guy. Everybody who's working in the world of metal is doing it because they love the music.
Yes, exactly. But I think it would do a disservice if you're not doing it professionally, if your stories are, crappy and fawning all over the people. It's nice to have, I don't know who's helped you out. It's nice to have a mentor. I don't know if I really did. But I wrote for reasonable magazines, and I had editors, who would say, what's this? Especially during my internship at the LA Times, I'd sit next to the editor, who was a this guy Robert Hilburn, super famous music critic in LA, and he'd be like, "Is this what you mean to say?" And the conclusion's really weak. And what can you sum up what the concert was? And I'm like, but I think it just needs to be taken as seriously as if you're covering the White House for the Washington Post.
Yeah.
I mean, so yeah, I think metal is important and deserves to be treated, respectfully in writing, not just like, I went to see this band and they were so rad. I really think.
Yeah, words of wisdom from probably the greatest supporter I've had for my site, which is the PR, Amy Fioretto.
Yes.
She said, "Don't be a punisher." That is
Yes.
the best words of wisdom I've ever gotten in my life.
Nice.
Which I think Jamie Jossa actually came up with that term. So,
right.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, someone like, Randy from Lamb of God, if you read his book, a lot of these guys are super, super articulate. I get pissed. I'm like, you write better than I do, damn it. You're a rock star and you're taking away my journalism credibility here.
Well, there's been a lot of musicians who, it's funny, actually, when I interviewed New Year's Day at NAMM, Ash said off the air, "It's so great to see you, a couple years ago I started on your side of the microphone."
Oh, really? I didn't know that about her.
Yeah, and Jamie Josta with Headbangers Ball.
Right.
I think Angela Gossow from Arch Enemy used to do interviews. I think she interviewed Michael Lamont when he was in Carcass or something like that.
So yeah, I think it's important, just as a journalist, to be super prepared, for an interview. Just don't go in and...
What's your newest album?
Exactly. Because then, that's how you build your reputation. That's how the bands appreciate the stories. That's how you get the better stories.
Yeah.
I mean, that's my take on it. I'd love to teach some kind of rock journalism class. I think there are a few out there, maybe. I don't know.
We gotta start a curriculum and
I know
propose it to
someone else
universities.
mentioned that. Even an online course. Yeah, I mean, I help out a few journalists, but if they come to me, they're like, "What do you think of this story?" Or "Here's my questions," and whatever. I would love to do that. I mean, yeah, I didn't really strictly have a mentor, but I think it's important. If people want to ask me, I'm always happy to help out. I edit, like my friend Jeremy Wagner from the band Broken Hope.
I interviewed him at NAMM.
Yes.
One of the nicest guys.
Such a sweet guy.
Oh my God, that was a party.
Yeah, he's great. So I met him in the early days, again, back in the days of money. I think Metal Blade flew me to Chicago, and I interviewed, I think, the original lineup. They've had 2 people die from that lineup, I think. And we've been friends ever since, and he's written several books, and I've edited a couple of his books. He's written
Rabbit Heart?
fiction books. Yes, I did the final edit on Rabbit Heart, and then he wrote a book previously called The Armageddon Chord, which is kind of, the hero's name is Kirk Visto, Kirk for Hammett, Vi, Stowe for Steve Vai. It's really, I think I called it, what did I call it? What's the Dan Brown book? The, it's not coming to me. But basically, it's kind of a mystery Raiders of the Lost Ark metal book, which is pretty damn cool.
Yeah.
So
he's like a mad scientist.
Yes,
that guy.
Exactly. So it's fun. I get to, Jeremy will come to me, and it's so cool that he's segued into fiction writing, horror fiction.
Yeah.
Because of course in Broken Hope his lyrics were unbelievably gory and fun.
Yeah. Oh, that guy. He's a mad scientist of metal.
Yes, he is. His book collection says I believe he bought Jeff Hanneman's book collection, actually.
Yes.
He bought the guitars, right?
No,
And the
I wasn't
books,
at Dime Bash at NAMM, sadly, because I was working Metal Allegiance, but he used Jeff Hanneman's guitar for that performance.
Yes, I saw the photos. I saw some video from that. I know.
Yeah, to get that story in the interview, I was just like, keep talking.
I know,
keep
right?
talking.
Right. So yeah, it's awesome to. I don't know how we segued into that, but not that I'm his mentor, but it's not. I enjoy helping people achieve, and I like when people help me out, because everyone needs an editor. I desperately need an editor.
Yeah,
so if anyone out there wants to help me out,
well, you just
and
let
I'll
me
help you out. It'll just be you know?
Well, you just led me to my next question and the
Yes.
final one.
Yes.
What could we be expecting? Because you've been doing so much in the realm of journalism. You've written articles for everybody. You got this awesome book, which please get it.
It only weighs 2 pounds. It's a good doorstop.
Right?
Yeah.
Good paperweight. Paper
Yeah,
to
I
hold
know.
down more paper.
Yeah, exactly.
But is there anything else you would like to promote with what you've been going
Well,
on?
thank you. No, I mean, I'm not really sure what my next step is. I'm really having fun now. I mean, like I said, I am not just metal, which actually it was kind of hard for me to break out and write about other things because I don't know what kind of other music you listen to.
Video game music,
well,
orchestra, like
I listen to kind of alt country. I mean, like I've interviewed Merle Haggard, I've interviewed Tom Waits, I've interviewed Steve Earle, Lucinda Williams. I really enjoy that kind of stuff, and I've been able to branch out a little bit on that in the last few years. I write for a magazine called No Depression. I'm doing something on folk music. Woody Guthrie,
Folk
Arlo
music?
Guthrie, yes.
do you know how much folk metal there is?
Yes, I know.
Hailstorm, Corpus
I
Climate?
know. Fin Troll. I know. So I'll sneak that in there. I know, right? So many. I mean, is there another genre that will come out like that?
Folk metal?
Yeah, I mean, what's after folk metal? What other kind of
Well,
class? Well, I mean, obviously there's symphonic metal.
It's
and all
theme
that
driven. Like
already.
Amon Amarth is called
Yes,
Viking
Viking.
metal, but that's like a sub.
So
of,
what else? I mean, what else are we missing? TV metal? I don't know. What else could
People are just nowadays, and this is actually really fun.
polka metal?
Maybe I don't know how
Weird Al could do an all metal.
somebody. If you go like. A lot of people, this happened, this was huge when I was in high school. They would make up a word or say a word and just add core at the end of it. Like there's a genre called Nintendo core. And if you look it up, like there's
Are
like
there bands?
there's a Wikipedia like article on that subgenre and there's like 2 or 3 bands on it. So it is a thing.
Yeah. So I will say this book was like 4 years in the making, really difficult but rewarding. I like the oral history format, which just means it's basically people's quotes woven together in a narrative. My co-author John he's co-written a couple books since this. He did the Al Jorgensen one and Scott Ian one, and he's now doing Jonathan Davis's book.
I can't wait for that
Yes.
book.
So I don't know. I love collaborating with people, and I love helping people tell their stories. But so almost everyone's done their books now. There's not a lot left, I feel. In fact, I wanted to do an Alice in Chains one, and then Duff McKagan says he was going to write it.
I have an idea brewing in my head now. I'm not going to say it while we're recording.
Okay.
But we're going to talk after
All right.
this.
So no, I have become friendly with Wes Orszowski. Hopefully pronounced that right, Wes. He is the director of the Lemmy video.
Okay.
And so he and I are talking, what can we do together? So we have an idea for a podcast, and we are pitching that around. So I think, right now, full-time producer of Nights with Alice Cooper, tons of freelancing, a Gimme radio show, and then, occasionally hosting things like I did for the New Year's Day event. So that keeps me super busy, and I don't think there's like anything on my bucket list that's, like next necessarily, but I'm open to everything. I do love collaborating. So hopefully Wes and I will get something going, telling stories in the rock and metal world in a podcast or, I think the Lemmy documentary, have you've seen that or no?
I haven't yet.
It's great. I think that was his first ever documentary, and he basically just went
Not the behind the music one.
No, not the behind the music. It's called Lemmy.
Okay.
It won some awards. It's great. So, telling stories, I guess just in different ways, hopefully. But if nothing else happens, I'm really happy with everything I'm doing now.
This is a pretty damn good thing.
I know, it's funny. It was never a goal to write a book. And when it came to me, I'm like,
I didn't choose the book life. The book life chose me.
Exactly. I'm a big reader, always have been. So to have my own book, it's just, I don't even know if it's sunk in yet. I mean, it's been out like 4 or 5 years or something, and I'm still like, wow, I can't believe it. Yeah, it's exciting.
Yep. And the last question before we go.
Uh-oh.
Want to do one last shot?
I guess. I hope there's no cameras back here.
Who cares?
Except yours, duh.
Yeah. Well, this will be aired long before they find anything out, so better to ask for forgiveness.
I wish I
than
had
permission.
iced tea in my bag. I could just fill it up like you do when you're a kid to make it look like the level hasn't changed.
Well, there's going to be other people who want to drink this, and
I don't want to ruin the Metallica experience.
They
for
just
them.
got to pay.
And I will say that's another thing actually I do. I have been editor of all the Metallica reissues.
Oh,
They do a booklet, and there's a bunch of essays in the booklet from producers, from the people at Q Prime, and so I've been editing all those essays, from the photographers. It's been a real kick to hear those stories.
that's
So
awesome.
that's been, I mean, there's always something super
They're
cool that comes to
everywhere.
me. I know it's exciting.
Yeah.
I'm blessed, as they say. I hate that, but I am.
Yeah,
Whatever.
this is
I'm
metal. We're
fucking
not
lucky.
supposed to be
I'm
blessed.
fucking lucky. I'm not blessed.
But here's to heavy
Cheers.
metal.
Yes.
Catherine.
Cheers.
To everybody of
Thank
Louder
you.
Than Hell.
Thank
Be sure to
you.
pick this book up. I would hold it up, but my hands are kind of full.
Yes.
And we'll see you next time on Heavy New York, everybody.
Cheers.
Yeah.